with you. Of course, I was gone last week, so we were still trying to get settled in with a new baby. And thank you to Shep for filling in for me last Sunday. And I just want to say publicly what personal gratitude I have for the Lord and His sovereignty deciding to call us to the same place to serve the Lord together. And what a comfort it is to me to know that there's someone on staff with even less sense than I have. And so it comes as a real blessing. I don't know if this comes as a thought of good news or bad news, but it's reality. It's a year now until Christmas. It's a year now until Christmas. And now, that being said, at the rate things are going, it's entirely likely, if not in fact probable, that you will be at Walmart in the spring seeking to buy Easter eggs, and you can also buy a new Christmas tree at the same time. I think that's the direction that we're going. But anyway, it's a year now until Christmas, and there's some things that I'm going to miss for sure about the Christmas season, but there are some things that I'm just not, and some things that I don't like about all that we do for Christmas, and one of them has to do with presents. I hate wrapping presents. I think that is awful. I think we ought to just hand it to them in a Walmart bag or whatever bag it came from. Here you go. But no, we don't do that. We wrap gifts. And I hate wrapping presents because it's like folding clothes except a lot worse, right? And part of the reason I hate that, is actually twofold. The first has to do with me and my own personality. And those who know me best would attest to this, that I'm very nitpicky. And so I can't just kind of get paper on it and it look bad. Everything's got to be straight and the lines folded, nice creases. It's got to look right. And so it takes me forever to wrap a gift. Beyond that, I have this problem, and maybe you have experienced this. In fact, perhaps you've experienced it just in recent weeks, and that is that you you get all your stuff together to wrap your gifts. So you've got a stack of boxes here, packages that you need to wrap, and you go to your dining room table, your kitchen table, or you clear some area off in the floor of the den or the living room, just some space where you've got to work. But you get all that together along with the wrapping paper and then a pair of scissors and some Scotch tape. So you got everything together, you sit down and you begin this process. And so the first order of business is to roll out some paper, and you try to do that in keeping with the size of the box that you're wanting to wrap. And so you set that box on a piece of paper and you kind of eyeball it and you say, okay, this is where I need to cut the paper. So you grab the scissors and you run it along the edge there, and so you cut that. Now you're on to tape, and so you tape this thing up, you fold, wrap it, everything is wonderful. Now you've got your first gift wrapped. Now it's time for box number 2. So you go to grab it, pull some paper out, set it in the middle, and you go to grab the scissors, and you're like, where's the scissors? They were just here. I mean, the only thing on this table, the only thing on this floor was these gifts, scissors, tape, wrapping paper. Where are they? And you start looking and looking and looking. And if you're like me, you find that somehow you put them in the oven, right? I know that's kind of a stretch, but not too far of a stretch, because it's so frustrating, because you're like, where did they go? I just had them. That they were just right here, and now they are gone. I just had it, and now it's gone. Hold that thought for a moment and then entertain this one. My hope for you over this Christmas season is that in spite of all the things that could have distracted you or occupied your thoughts or carried you away from the significance and the real meaning of Christmas, my hope is that you very much had a Christmas season that for which Jesus was the central focus, and that in spite of all the trappings of the season, that you were able and intentional about being able to focus on the fact that God in Christ came into this world so that you might know Him, that you might have a relationship with Him, that you might be able to be forgiven, that you might be able to go to heaven one day, that you might be able to follow Him. That's my hope. And my hope is that throughout this Christmas season, in trying to be intentional in thinking about that you actually got closer to Christ. And especially as you get to Christmas Day, there's this sense in your heart that you feel like, I'm close to Him. But what can very easily, and too often what unfortunately happens, is that you will have these moments where it's Christmas or it's some other event that you're so close to Jesus, and then all of a sudden life begins to happen and things get busy, and you got stuff going on at work, at school, finances, carting kids around. You got all this stuff going on, and you're like, wait a minute, I just had him. How did I lose him? There's this distance that there seems to be between Jesus and I. You're probably very familiar with what comes to us as probably the central Christmas text in the New Testament out of Luke chapter 2. You remember how that chapter starts. It came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. You remember that. You've heard it since childhood, many of you. The next thing that happens in Luke's gospel after the birth of Jesus is his presentation at the temple on the 8th day after birth. The next time we find Jesus, and all of this is in the same chapter, Jesus is no longer an infant. He's 12 years old, and what has happened? Mary and Joseph have lost him. In the span of one chapter, they could not be any closer than they are to Jesus, but by the end of the chapter, they have lost him. And too many times, that can happen to us as followers of Christ. It may be Christmas, it may be some other event that brings us closer to the Lord, that causes us to pursue intimacy in ways that we have not in a long time, and we get so close, and then all of a sudden things happen, and we recognize, wait a minute, where did this distance come from? It's like we've gotten separated. Where did he go? I just had him. How in the world does that happen? Well, I think we see the answer to that today in Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, if you would look with me in your Bibles today, to Luke chapter 2, starting with verse 41. Luke chapter 2, starting with verse 41. All right, so at this point, Luke tells us that Mary and Joseph went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. When they had finished the days, as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem. Joseph and his mother did not know it. Rather, supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now so it was that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard it were astonished at his understanding and answers, and when they saw him, they were amazed. Mary said to Jesus, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously." And Jesus said to them, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" But as for Mary and Joseph, they did not understand the statement which he spoke to them. So here you've got Mary and Joseph. The chapter begins, they couldn't be any closer to Jesus. They've got him right there in their arms. By the end of the chapter, where'd he go? Where'd he go? Maybe not physically, but spiritually, you've experienced something like that. How in the world does that happen? Well, it happens, first of all, when we do not pay attention. It happens when we do not pay attention. The chapter begins with Jesus as a newborn baby. By the time you get to verse 41, Jesus is not a baby anymore. He's 12 years old. And it's unfortunate, but the Bible does not give us any descriptives. It doesn't provide any narrative information about what Jesus' formative childhood years were like. We're not told anything about him until, again, we reach what we read here, and he's now 12 years old. At 12 years old, though, Jesus almost certainly would have been spending far less time with Mary and would have been spending a lot more time with Joseph. He would have been hanging out in the carpenter shop. He would have been learning the tools of the trade and the skills of the trade of carpentry and woodworking. And so Jesus is spending a lot of time with Joseph. Beyond that, Jesus, as a 12-year-old Jewish male, would have experienced a bar mitzvah, which literally means son of the law. There would have been this actual formal ceremony during which Jesus symbolically, like every other 12-year-old male Jew, would have crossed the line from childhood into adulthood, though just 12 years old. At this point, his training would have become much more formal in terms of the teachings of Jewish tradition and of the teachings of the Old Testament. Beyond that, one of the things that would have become part and parcel for his experience would be annual trips to Jerusalem, specifically to the temple. What we find here is that Jesus has gone with Mary and Joseph to the temple where they're going to celebrate and observe a really big day in the Jewish calendar, which was the celebration and the observance of Passover. Now, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, they lived in Nazareth. The distance between Nazareth and Jerusalem was about 80 miles. And the faithful Jews from the region would make their way to Jerusalem, but it wouldn't be this family and that family all traveling individually. What you would have would be larger groups of people, larger family units. There might have been aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins and second cousins and third cousins and friends and folks in the neighborhood. Hey, we're going to all kind of travel together. It's entirely likely that Jesus was part of a group numbering 50, 60, 100, maybe more that traveled from Nazareth together as a caravan to Jerusalem. Once they get to Jerusalem, they're going to be celebrating and observing the Passover. And more often than not, these families would stay an additional week in Jerusalem to observe what was known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Whether or not they actually stayed for that, we don't know. All we know is, according to Luke, they've spent their time in Jerusalem. Now it is time to go back home. And so the caravan that they have traveled with, they are going to travel with back home. And so the group gets together, and Mary and Joseph, they've got all their stuff packed, probably loaded up some animals, and this mass of people is heading out of Jerusalem, headed 80 miles towards Nazareth. Now, in all likelihood, in a group such as this, you would have had this larger group broken up into a series of smaller groupings, women with women, men with men, children with children. And then you've got people like Jesus. Around the age of 12, Jesus could have been with some of the men. He could have been with some of his peers, a group of young adolescents that they were kind of walking together as a group. Anyway, the day begins. Mary and Joseph have left Jerusalem, and finally, it gets time to stop in the evening. At this point, this is when families would have gotten their tents set up to spend the night. They would have started to work on an evening meal. They would have gone from being in these separate groups to reestablishing the family unit. And it's finally at this point that Mary and Joseph realize Jesus is not with them. In all likelihood, it probably started something like this. Hey, Joseph, have you seen Jesus? I've been looking for him. I haven't seen him. Well, no, I thought he was with you. Well, I haven't seen him all day. Come to think of it, I haven't either. And bit by bit, they begin to ask around, have you seen Jesus? Have you seen Jesus? Have you seen Jesus? And all of a sudden, they are panic-stricken because they realize Jesus is not here. We have talked to every person. We have done a census of the entire group, and Jesus is emphatically not with us. They have been traveling an entire day, and Jesus was not with them for the first step. He never left Jerusalem. He never left the temple. Mary and Joseph, though, in the busyness of the moment, with all they had to take care and with all the other distractions, all that was going on, somehow they left the city without their own Jesus. But understand, it was they who left, not Jesus. Jesus never went anywhere. They were the ones that walked off without him. Why? Because they were not paying attention. They were not paying attention and just assumed that he was still with them. I believe that same principle all too easily carries over to our lives as well as those who profess to be followers of Jesus. Let me ask you this. Do you feel like, in terms of your relationship with the Lord right now, that you're really close? Do you feel like legitimately your relationship with the Lord is really truly close. You talk on a regular basis, and you're spending time hearing from Him as He speaks to you from His Word, as you are listening to the still small voice of the Holy Spirit as He is encouraging, guiding, correcting. Do you feel that? Or do you feel like, we talk every once in a while, and I take my Bible to church with me. I go to church, but no, I wouldn't. Close is not the word that I would use. Understand, it's not because Jesus has gone anywhere. Rather, it's because you've done some traveling. Assuming that you had Him with you, when in truth you just emphatically were not paying attention to Him. And like Mary and Joseph, it's not that you intended or I intended to do this. Mary and Joseph did not set out that day and say, okay, let's leave Jesus in Jerusalem. That wasn't the plan. They fully expected and they anticipated. They assumed Jesus is with us. They didn't intend for this to happen, but it did. Maybe you didn't intend to wind up where you are spiritually right now, very much kind of separated from the Lord. Well, how did it happen? Why did it happen? The same reason that occurred back in the first century. It happens when we don't pay attention. I don't know why it is that we are the way we are physically as people, but one of the things that we are susceptible to is experiencing, and I wish it had a better name because it sounds terrible, but we're prone to get warts, right? Yay, wart. I've had them before. Maybe you've had them before. They're not really a big problem per se. They're kind of an eyesore, more of a nuisance. But all it is, I think, is a virus in the skin. You put some medicine on it, and they go away. I've experienced them before. You might have as well. No big deal. Anyway, Andrew, our second oldest, wound up with some warts on his knee. And so what we did was to go to the store and got some medicine. And I decided to try this new stuff. It was called Wart Stick. Isn't that a great title? Really captures the attention. Anyway, so it's called Wart Stick, and it looks like a tube of chapstick. And the neat thing about that is it doesn't go on wet. You don't have to cover it up and all that kind of stuff. And so you put it on the affected area. You do that for, 2 weeks, and it's supposed to go away. So that's how it's supposed to work. Anyway, I buy this stuff, and I bring it home. I'm taking it out of the package, getting ready to hand it to Andrew so he can take it down to his room. And Caroline and the whole family, being aware of how much, and I've shared this before, how much I love and how consistently I use chapstick, I said, I better pay attention because wouldn't that be funny for me to put wart stick all over my mouth? So I hand it to Andrew. He takes it downstairs. All right, fast forward a week or so, and Peter has been born. We bring him home from the hospital. And for the first couple of weeks, what's going to happen, and we still probably got another week left of this, Caroline is in our bedroom, in our bed with the baby. It's just kind of easier for them just to be in there with him getting up so much during the night. And what I have been doing is sleeping downstairs in an extra bed in Andrew's room. There's another twin bed in there. You know where this is going. Anyway, so the other night I have brushed my teeth, I've changed my clothes, I go downstairs, and the only lights in Andrew's room are just that of a night light. And I've already got my stuff set up in there. I've got some glasses I use to read at night, and I keep my tube of chapstick in there. And so the room is fairly dull and dim. Andrew is already asleep. And before I get in the bed, I'm going to do what I always do, and that's to grab the tube of chapstick and get ready to go to bed. And so I grab this tube, take the lid off, and I plop it all over my upper lip when I realize that's not chapstick. You can look very close. No warts, none whatsoever. And boy, nothing warms the heart and really gets you ready for bed like a good dose of 40% salicylic acid. You like that, Heather? I'm sorry. And here I am thinking, I really messed that up. How in the world did that happen? It happened because of two reasons. One, I assumed that I had chapstick, and that happened because I was not paying attention. I was not paying attention. Let me just tell you that where you are in your walk with the Lord right now, it did not happen by chance. It just didn't wind up this way just by coincidence. It happened, whatever state, whether it's one of closeness and intimacy or strength or one of separation and lack of spiritual strength and progress and development, whatever the case is, wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, it is due because of choices that you have made, and specifically what it is that you've paid attention to, more specifically who it is that you have paid attention to. Mary and Joseph wind up separated from Jesus, assuming that they've had him with them all along, but never once did they stop to say, never once did they pause to examine, do we have him with us? They assumed that he was still with them, but he wasn't, because they were not paying attention. You've been paying attention to all sorts of things. We live busy lives. We live in a busy world. Lots of obligations and responsibilities. And I'm not saying that you can't and shouldn't pay attention to a whole lot of things. What I am saying to you is this. There's one thing and one person that matters most, and that's the Lord himself. And if you do not pay attention to him, you'll experience exactly what Mary and Joseph did. Why does it happen? It happens when we don't pay attention. But it also happens when we do not seek fresh encounters. It happens when we do not seek fresh encounters. Mary and Joseph are separated from Jesus, and for us in the 21st century, especially here in America, it's a little surprising for us and a little shocking that something like this could happen, because we have become so safety conscious now, and we want to make sure that, even little toddlers, we put these little backpacks on that look like monkeys that are essentially just leashes that we carry our kids. We don't get separated at all. We're so concerned that something may happen. It's shocking to us what has occurred here, but this was not at all unusual what's going on. You've got this massive caravan of people, and guys with guys, women with women, kids with kids, adolescents with adolescents, and this is not at all unusual. But Mary and Joseph have left Jerusalem that morning. They had seen Jesus. He was with them that morning. They had almost certainly shared breakfast together. Mary and Joseph get all the stuff packed, and this massive group of people begins to leave town, and they're telling themselves, okay, Jesus is with us. But they wind up at the end of the day saying, where is he? How did we get separated from him? How is it that he is not with us? And the reason for that for them is the exact same reason that it can occur for me and for you, and that is that they did not, as too often we do not, seek out fresh encounters. What had happened is that they had an encounter with him that morning, but they didn't seek him out at 10 o'clock. They didn't try to check in with him at noon. They didn't try to check in at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And finally, at evening time, when the sun is beginning to go down, they've had a long, full day of travel, and it's time for the family to get together. It's time to get the tent set up and to get stabled for the night. Finally, they realize he is not with us. And it happened because they had gone this entire day, and not a single time had they ever gone to check on and check in with Jesus. They contented themselves with the last experience they had. They contented themselves with the last experience they had with him. Too many times this same type of thing occurs today among those that profess to be Christ followers. We wind up separated from Jesus because we content ourselves with the last experience we had with him. For some, that was when they trusted him as their Savior and Lord. For others, maybe it was a revival service, some special service that occurred at this or some other church. Maybe it was at a camp a couple of years ago, or some special conference that you attended. And the event was so significant, it was so positive, it was so impacting that it influenced and altered and had an impact on your life. Things changed, but what happened is that after that, it never occurred to you, I need to keep checking in. I had this great encounter with him on this day. I need to have another encounter with him today and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. It happens when we do not continue to seek fresh encounters with him, and then all of a sudden we wake up and realize, ask ourselves, well, what happened? Where did he go? Seemed like I just had him. But now it feels as though we are miles apart. Well, it happened then as it happened today when we cease seeking to have fresh encounters. One of the things that I really love about the Christmas season is the music, and many of you would nod in agreement to that. I mean, I love the Christian songs. I love Joy to the World and Hark the Herald Angels Sing. I love those traditional Christmas Christian carols. I also love a lot of the secular songs, though, as well. I love White Christmas. I love Silver Bells. I even like a little bit of Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, right? Now, I love this music, I really do. And I keep a radio going in my office the entire day. When I'm in the car, the radio is always on. And I promise you, since the week before Thanksgiving, I have listened to non-stop Christmas music. I mean, every song has been Christmas music. But now Christmas is over. And you know what? I don't want to hear any more Christmas music. I'm back to Southern Gospel and old Merle Haggard tunes. Why? Because I've had all of this Christmas music, and there's a part of me that says, okay, I've got my fill, I'm good for a year. I've had my fill of this, I am good for a while. And that same mentality all too easily permeates our relationship with the Lord, where we have this experience. And do not get me wrong, do not misunderstand me. If you had some significant encounter with the Lord, let's say in particular in this past year, that very much impacted you and very much was an instance where God got your attention and drew you back to Him in a significant way, I am so grateful that you had that. It's wonderful that you had that, but do not misunderstand me, and I believe do not misunderstand the Lord. That is not sufficient for the long term. He is not content for you to have a singular experience with Him, but rather to have ongoing, fresh encounters with Him. Why? Because when you choose not to do that, when you're not intentional about seeking out fresh encounters with Him, what happens is that bit by bit, life happens. You get so busy, you get so preoccupied, all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, where did He go? Where did He go? I had that great experience back at camp. I had this significant encounter with the Lord at church on that particular day. How did this happen? Well, it happened because I did not, or because you did not continue to seek out fresh encounters. There's a final reason that this happens based on what we see here, and that is that we do not remember the chain of command. We do not remember the chain of command. All right, so Mary and Joseph have realized, hey, Jesus is not here. And again, you can imagine the fear that they had, the uncertainty, and that they realized, man, we have gone an entire day. I don't know how many miles you can walk as a group together in a day, but they've gone a long way. I mean, it's at the end of the day. Night is falling, and they don't have a car with headlights and flashlights or that type of thing. They're kind of stuck for the night. They're going to have a sleepless night in a tent miles away from Jesus with the hope of the next day getting back to Jerusalem as quickly as they can. So they've traveled and gone an entire day without Jesus. At the end of that day, they go to bed, they get up the next morning, and they travel an entire day again to get back to Jerusalem. And then Luke tells us that they don't find Him on that day. They spend virtually all of the third day before they finally find Him. They go to the temple, and there they find Jesus, and He's surrounded by the religious leaders of the day. He's talking with them, asking them questions. It seems clear they're asking Him questions. They're astounded by this young man and how he is thinking about things that no one else his age is, and his understanding and his wisdom is just unparalleled. Mary and Joseph see Him, and you can imagine the relief that they had. Maybe you have been out in a mall or in a store somewhere, and you get separated from your child. Maybe it was on the beach or something, and you're scared to death. And in your mind, a million terrible scenarios have unfolded, all the horrible things that could have happened to your child and all the terrors that might have come their way. And man, when you finally get your eyes to land on them, you feel so good. They're okay. And then you're ready to kill them. That's exactly how Mary and Joseph feel. Notice that they don't go up to Him and say, Jesus, it is so good to see you. So glad to have found you. Look in verse 48. Mary says, "Why have you done this to us?" Do you have any idea what the past 3 days have been like for us? I mean, 3 whole days have passed since we last saw you. We went 2 entirely sleepless nights. We are absolutely exhausted, physically spent, emotionally drained, and only to find out you never left the city in the first place. Why in the world did you do this terrible thing to us? You've broken your mother's heart. And Jesus responds. He says, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Very easily, I think, Mary and Joseph over time forgot about the encounters that they had with angels announcing his miraculous conception. And too easily over time, they kind of just got used to Jesus as just one of the kids, just like the other children that were part of their family. Forgetting that the angels had spoke of, and when he was dedicated at the temple, Samuel had spoken, or Simeon the prophet had spoken of what this child was going to grow up to experience and how this was going to impact them. They just kind of forgot about all of that, it seems. And Jesus, at just 12 years old, reminds them, listen, I came here for a reason, for a specific purpose, and that purpose was to accomplish a mission that the Father ordained. And I've got to be about his business. Mary and Joseph, though, they didn't get that. They didn't understand that. In fact, in all likelihood, they probably would not understand for a period more years, maybe even a couple of more decades. Maybe even after the death of Jesus, Mary thinks back and she realizes, oh, that's what he meant. At this point, they don't get it. They're just mad because Jesus is supposed to do what they want to do. Where they go, he goes. The direction they decide to go, he is supposed to follow. And Jesus reminds them of the chain of command, that he is one about the Father's purposes and plans. And his goal is not to follow, and his primary task is not to follow them. You know, in truth, I believe too easily and too frequently we fall into the same pattern of thought as Mary and Joseph. And we get so busy with life, and it's not that we intend to do this, but we operate with this mentality that Jesus kind of just follows us along in life, and we don't have to give him much attention. We don't have to stop and talk to him regularly. Yeah, that would be good, but we don't have to, and we don't have to check in regularly. He's just going to kind of be there with us, and so at any point that we need him, we can just kind of turn, hey, Jesus, can you help me out with this? Or we make a decision, we go through a crossroads, and we make all the choices. We never consult him, but we say, okay, Jesus, this is what I did. How about straightening this out and make all this good? Will you bless this stuff that I've done? Hey, can you help me with this? In fact, about the only time that we give a whole lot of attention is actually when our back is against the wall. When there's a real need, then we say, oh, Jesus, can you help me with this? And we do this and we operate in that fashion as though Jesus is just kind of following us around. You realize how backwards that is? Do you remember what Paul said in Romans 10:9 when he's talking about how it is that we become a Christian? He says, if you will confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus. Lord means master. It means that he's in charge. It means that he sets the path. He establishes the direction. He charts out the route. I follow him. It's not a case of him following me around and sprinkling some magic dust on all the stuff that I want. That's not how it works. I am to be following him. And when I forget that, I'll experience exactly what Mary and Joseph did. All of a sudden, it will hit me like a ton of bricks. We're separated. There's this gap, there's this distance, and then all of a sudden, too, you realize it's not because he walked away, it's because I had. It's happened because I forgot the chain of command. I am following Him, not Him following me. Maybe you say, well, Michael, I've heard what you said this morning. This has really kind of struck a bell and resonated with me. I kind of feel that way. And it's not that I feel completely estranged, but really my walk with the Lord is not at all what it could be, not at all what it should be, not at all what it used to be. I've kind of walked away from Him. In fact, I hadn't given a whole lot of thought until this morning. I kind of feel very much like Mary and Joseph, so what do I do? The other day, I was getting ready to leave the house. I was going somewhere, I don't know, just trying to escape from all those children. But I'm getting ready to leave to go somewhere to get something. I don't remember what it was, but I've got my keys. And before I leave, I want to make sure that I've got my phone with me in case Caroline needs me. And I reach over my side, and I use a phone that's in one of those clip things that clips onto your belt. And all I've got is the clip holster. I don't have my phone with me. And so the first place I'm going to go look is in the den. I look on the table, it's not there. I look on the couch, the chair, the love seat, it's not there. Okay, it's not, look on the kitchen table, it's not there. And then, okay, I'm going to go to my bedroom because a lot of times I will put it either up on my chest of drawers or on Caroline's dresser. And I look and it's not there. I'm like, I've looked everywhere. Where in the world is this? Where did I put this thing? And so at that point, I stopped. And I started asking myself some questions, very simple questions. All right, when was the last time I used it? Oh, it was this morning when so-and-so called me, and I was standing next to the stove making coffee. So I hightail it into the kitchen, and where's my phone? It's right next to the stove. Why did I find it there? Because I asked myself, what was I doing, and where was it when I last had it? So again, if you feel you're in the same boat of Mary and Joseph, I want you to ask those two questions. What was I doing? And where was I at when I felt like I last had Him? Odds are there were some things going on in your life that have stopped. There were regular conversations that you had throughout the day with Him. There was intentional time that you spent reading His Word. There were times throughout your life, the regular ongoings of the day, where you were facing decisions, sometimes even seemingly inconsequential, where you said, Lord, what do you want me to do? If you want to feel how things were then, you need to go back and start doing what you were doing then. That's where they reconnected with Jesus. Mary and Joseph, if they could get separated from Jesus, if it could happen to them, it certainly can happen to you. But here's the good news. They got reconnected and reunited with Him. And if it can happen to them, thank God it can happen for you if you want it. Will you pray with me? Lord, you know what's going on in our hearts even better than we know. And there are things that people are thinking about this morning and emotions that they're wrestling with that I have absolutely no idea about. And I believe, Lord, that you have, through your Spirit and through your Word, helped people to see things that they might not have been paying attention to for a long time. For some, it may be days or weeks. For others, months. Perhaps others, decades. And it's not that they ceased to be your child. It's not that they lost their salvation. It may very well be that they have it, but in terms of relationship and fellowship, they've done exactly what Mary and Joseph did. And until this very moment, have not realized it. God, as you have shown people in their heart through the power of your Spirit in ways that I never could, as you've helped them to see that, I pray, God, that you help them to use this time of decision to come back, to seek out, to reconnect, to restore, to experience closeness like they once did, like you want them to, like they can again. Lord, for others that you may be calling to make decisions, perhaps it's to find out how they can begin a relationship with you, or for others to become a part of this church family formally. God, I don't know how it is that you've spoken to people, but I believe that you have. And I pray, God, that we will respond. We'll respond as you guide us. We commit this decision time to you in Christ's name. Amen. I'm going to ask if you